So there's this rabbi who gets up one week at his sermon and he says, guys, for next week I have some homework for you. I would like you all to check out Leviticus chapter 37, verse 12. Okay? Sure. The next week he comes to the sermon and he says, okay, gentlemen, who did their homework last week? Who looked up Leviticus 38:12? And people are a little uncomfortable, really nobody looked it up. But okay, one hand goes up, another hand goes up. People see, all right, before you know it, at least half the congregation has their hand up. Who's going to admit to the rabbi, So the rabbi says, okay. He says, there is no Leviticus 38:12. However, what I do want to talk about is Leviticus 19:11, which says you shall not lie. So, that is our conversation today, honesty. Before we start, I want to give you a few quotes about honesty. Number one, F.M. Hubbard used to say, honesty pays, but it doesn't seem to pay enough for many people. And then Winston Churchill said, men occasionally stumble over the truth, but most of them pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing had happened. And last but not least, Austin O'Malley said, those who think it is permissible to tell white lies soon grow colorblind. Okay. So I want to ask you a question, by raise of hand. Who here feels that you should always be honest? Alrighty, we got good work for today then. I'll tell you a story that happened to me. When I was in social work school, I was in my final semester, and they require every graduating student to take a class on social work ethics, which makes sense. We should be ethical in our practice, and it's our last semester. We're about to go out into practice. So they require us to take a class on ethics, and the class describes, social work has like the NASAW, the National Association of Social Workers, has like a handbook of all the ethics, like the National Association of Social Work has agreed upon are the proper ethics for social workers. And we get to ethic number 6, which is integrity or honesty or something like that. And my teacher comes into the class and she says to everybody in the class, okay, who here believes that you should always be honest? And everybody in the class raises their hand, except for me. And one other guy. A Hasidic dude sitting on the other side of the room. We're practically the only guys, first of all. In general, in social work school, men are vastly outnumbered by women. So we may have been the only 2 men in the class, number one. And we're also the only 2 Orthodox Jews in the class. And we're the only people who are saying, you don't got to be honest all the time. So we're getting daggers, right? We are getting daggers pointed at us from everybody in the class. So I say to the teachers, can I defend my position over here? So she says, sure. So I said, look. I said, imagine you come home, and it's your anniversary, and you were stuck at the office late. And your wife, who's a very busy person, she came home early. And she got the kids off to bed early. And she cooked this amazing dinner just for you. And she set up the table beautifully. And she's got the candles and a big champagne bucket with a bottle of champagne. And she worked so hard, and she just did it for you. And she knows that you're a real carnivore, so she researched the best recipes for meat, and she found for the main course, it's a multi-course dinner, but she knows that you're all about the meat. And she found this recipe, and she's been marinating it in secret. She didn't want you to find it for 3 days. You come into the door, you can't believe it, it's amazing. What she did for you, wow, wow, wow. And then finally it comes time and she serves you this meat, this London broil that she prepared for days in advance. Literally had it marinating in the secret refrigerator in the basement in a way that you wouldn't find it. And she looks at you and says, so honey, how's the meat? And the meat tastes like earth. Are you supposed to be honest at that moment and say, I want you to know, I deeply appreciate everything that you did for me, but if you want to know the truth, honesty is the best policy. The meat tastes like earth. Is that what you're supposed to do?
No.
Absolutely not! Which is what I said in my social work class. And by the way, the professor, who had actually written a book on ethics, she says, you know what? She says, Yehuda's right. That's what they used to call me in social work school, Yehuda, not Leiby. My full name is Yehuda Leiby, so my Jewish friends call me Leiby, but when I'm anything official, like my license, it's all Yehuda. When I was in school, I went by Yehuda. So the professor says, you know what? Yehuda's right. You shouldn't always be 100% honest. So the reality is that honesty is a tricky thing. Let's look at the first source in the Torah on honesty. Exodus 23:7, Midvar Sheker Tirchak, which means stay far away from falsehood. Now this is a very different statement than most of the Torah prohibitions. Most prohibitions in the Torah are written in very absolute terms. You shall not do this. You shall not eat creepy crawlies. You shall not go into the temple when you are impure. You shall not marry your sister. You shall, that's for the down south, no. You shall, the Torah speaks in very absolute terms. You shall honor your parents. You shall eat matzah. If you look at this statement, it doesn't say you shall not lie. It says keep far from falsehood. Now there's two ways to understand this. And both of these ways are valid. And both of these ways are brought down by great rabbis. One way is that, well, the Torah did not want to say explicitly, you shall not lie, because there are times that you are called upon to say a mistruth. You like how I changed that, right? Yeah. A mistruth. There are times where you're called on to say something that's not true. Like that example I just gave you with the meat. That's one way. The other way says, no. The Torah here didn't just want to say you shall not lie. Because it's so easy, it's such a slippery slope. So easy to fall in from saying this to saying that. That's why the Torah has to say, stay far away from falsehood. It doesn't have to tell you, stay far away from eating pig. It says, don't eat pig. But when it comes to this, because it's such a slippery slope, and these things come up 1,000 times a day, that's why the Torah here has to say, keep far away from falsehood. I'm sorry, I made the blessing already. I like to make the blessing and get all the amens, but... Okay, so it makes it very complicated. You're in your house. The phone rings. And your husband, who just got back from an exhausting day, says, if it's my work, tell them I'm not here. You pick up the phone. Hey, it's the secretary from the office. Is your husband home? What do you say there? You work in a company. And they do an audit. And they discover that Alex, the guy in accounting, has been fudging the books for years. Sorry, you do an audit, an internal audit, and you realize he's been fudging the books for years. Then you look into it, and he hasn't been stealing. He's not pocketing any money. All he's been doing is basically changing some of the orders of the orders and the buy orders and the sell orders to keep it even throughout the 12 months. He just wanted it to be a nice, consistent thing, although the business is more cyclical. So when there were a lot of orders, a lot of buys during the holiday season or whatever it was, he wouldn't report some of those, and then he would report them later when it was a slow season. He wasn't taking any money home. Do you have to report him now to the top office? He's going to lose his job. He's a father with a bunch of kids. But on the other hand, he has been mishandling the books. There are a lot of very, very tough situations that come up. Okay. Let's look at a few more of the Torah sources. Source number 2, Leviticus 19:11. That's this week's Torah portion, my friends. This week's Torah. How timely is that? How amazing. Okay? Says the pasuk, Lo signovu, you shall not steal, Lo sechachashu, you shall not make false denials. Someone says, hey buddy, I lent you $100, where's the money? What? Lent me $100? I don't know what you're talking about. That's a false denial. V'lo seshakaru, ish ba'amiso, you shall not lie to each other. Now here it's very interesting. In source number 1, we said the Torah didn't say do not lie, it said stay far from falsehood. Here, it says you shall not lie to each other. What's the difference? What's the difference? The difference, my friends, is in context. We always have to look at the context of this verse. The second verse is talking about business dealings. You shall not steal, you shall not make false denials, and you shall not lie to each other. Now, there may be scenarios where if my wife says to me, how does the meat taste? I say, it tastes amazing. Can I have some more, please? But, on the other hand, if it's your competitor, or someone comes into your lot and said, how does this car run? And you say, it runs amazing. It's smooth like butter. That's not so much allowed. That's absolutely not allowed. And if someone brings in their favorite car that they've had for so long and all they want is to hear that it's running well, and they'll give it to you for half the price, but if you tell them that it's not running well, they're going to get angry and offended, and it doesn't make a difference. When it comes to business, you shall not lie. When it comes to interpersonal relationships, there is some wiggle room over there. The Torah says keep far from falsehood, but doesn't necessarily say you shall not lie. But when it comes to business, you shall not lie. There's no excuses. Not that there's no excuses. There's no time that it's appropriate to lie in order to get financial benefit from someone else. Another example is Lo saneh b'reacha eid shaker. This is actually in the Ten Commandments. You shall not be a false witness against your fellow. So this in terms is another injunction about honesty in the Torah. And let's see one more then. This is actually a very interesting one. The Torah has a very specific commandment about how you keep your weights and measures. Okay? So for example, I don't know if you know this, but when you go fill up your gas, every single pump has on it a sticker that it was inspected from the Department of Weights and Measures. I remember I once had a situation where I went to a gas station, and it was not like a BP, it was a little bit more of a sketchy gas station. It was on a reservation, so there was no taxes, so the prices were really cheap. But I had filled up gas not long before, maybe 100 miles back, whatever it was. Then I filled up a full tank, and it gave me like 12, 13 gallons. When I was driving on the highway, maybe 100 miles, my car got at least 20, 30 miles a gallon. You know, just something was wrong, and I went in there, he's like, no, this was inspected by the Office of Weights and Measures. That's the one time in my life where I knew someone was stealing from me with a scale. Back in the day, you know, people would put something on the scale, and often, you know, the scale might have a little extra weight added onto it. Or the little thumb, exactly, right? Right. You know, one little thumb can make you a lot of dollars a day, right? Right? People just put it on softly on, okay? Let me see what that weighs, right? So the Torah says, there's a commandment in the Torah about having proper scales and proper measures. But the interesting thing is, it says, you shall have a proper hin and a proper ephah. Now those are both the same measurement. One's in dry volume, one's in liquid volume. So here's the source is in source number 4. It says you shall have just scales. Not only scales, but just as in justice. You shall have proper scales. Just weights. A just ephah. And a just hin. Now, the Talmud asks, what do you mean? An ephah and a hin are basically the same thing. Talmud, source number 5, Bava Metzia, 49a. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, says, what does it mean in the verse when it says you should have a just hin? Isn't a hin the same thing as an ephah? And it just told us that you should have a just ephah? Rather, the word hin can mean yes. Rather, the Torah is telling you, you shall have a just and an honest yes. That when you say yes, you mean yes, and when you say no, you mean no. When a person says, don't worry, I'll take care of that, that's their word. Can you give me this price? Oh, yes! Then you come down to the store and it's like, well, there was another fee, and there was the surtax, and the inflation adjustment cost, and there's a miscellaneous items line, right? The Torah tells you there was a time where business was done with a lot less contracts. Today we have any business deal that goes down, you have like 1,200 page contracts. Insanity, you know what I'm saying? It's absurd. There was a time where people would say, you know what? Can you sell me that building for $4 million? Yes. They would shake on it, and that was it. The next day someone came in and offered him $4.5 million. I'm sorry, I sold it already. The Torah is telling you that even your yes has to be just and honest. As a matter of fact, on Erev Rosh Hashanah, when we do Hatarat Nidarim, okay, there's a process that we do on Erev Rosh Hashanah. It's called the nullification of vows, where we basically ask forgiveness for vows if we forgot about them, if we made a mistake, whatever it is. God forbid, we don't want to go into the high holidays with unfulfilled vows on our hands. So we ask for a whole different slew of different kinds of things that could be construed as a vow. And one of them is V'gam Hana'asa B'Stakiyas Kaf. Anything that's done with a handshake. If you shake your hand on a deal, that is a commitment. So the Torah tells you your yes has to be true and your no has to be true. Okay, so far it seems the Torah is pretty pro on honesty. Does God always tell the truth? So, let's look at a source. Source number 6. So what happens? God sends these angels to Abraham, and Abraham rushes to help them out. And they give him a very good news. And they give him a very, very good, sort of like a prophecy. They tell him that he's going to have a child. He and Sarah are going to have a child. Now by that time, Sarah's 89 and Abraham is 99. They're not exactly spring chickens. So, listen to what happens. Source number 6. And the angel said to Abraham, I will surely return to you at this time, and Sarah, your wife, will have borne a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, while Abraham was on the other side. And Abraham and Sarah were elderly. And back then, 89 and 100 and 99 was called elderly. Today, it's the new 40. And Abraham and Sarah were elderly and had lived long years, and the way of women had ceased from Sarah. And Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I've ceased to have my way, and my husband's so old, am I going to have a child? That's it. It's not going to happen. Now God goes to admonish Abraham about this, and he says, why is Sarah laughing? Asking, will I still bear children while I am so old? If you look back in the verse, that's not exactly what Sarah said. She said, my husband is so old. You notice that, right? Yeah. Again, Sarah said, am I going to have children? Well, she did acknowledge that she was already past her period of youth, but she also says that my husband is so old. And God comes to Abraham and says, why is Sarah saying, am I going to have a child, but I'm so old? But that's not what she said. She said, my husband is so old. Continues God, does God betray his word? At the appointed time, I will return to you, and Sarah will have borne a child. And Sarah did not deny this, saying, I did not laugh, rather I was afraid. And he, God, says back to her, no, you did laugh. So here's the interesting thing. It seems like God's changing the truth. God is not seeming to report, as they say, just the facts, man. It's a little bit, it looks like a little bit of an untruth. And actually the Talmud seizes on this. And the Talmud says, Rabbi Elah said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, one is permitted to alter one's words for the sake of peace. Based on this story. That you're allowed to change the truth for the sake of peace. Of peace. Now, by the way, we see that God did it. We see other people doing it. Abraham does it by telling Sarah to say that she's my sister. You guys remember that story? They're going to go down to Egypt, and if the Egyptians think that she's his wife, they may kill her. There may be a lack of peace there. Right? That would be a little bit lack of peace. They kill me for my wife. So they change the story up. She's my sister. We know that when it comes time for the blessings, Jacob goes in and says, I am base of your firstborn. Right? Now he did pause. Right? So it could be he was saying, I am. Esav is your firstborn. But there was definitely some trickery there. There's no question about that. We know that Aharon, the high priest, if he knew two people were fighting, if he knew that Bob and Phil were fighting, he would go over to Phil and say, hey, Phil, you know, I just ran into Bob. And Bob was telling me he remembers the good old days when you guys were such good friends, and you were tight, and he just misses that friendship. And he really wishes he could get back together with you, but he's so embarrassed to come over and apologize. It's very tough to apologize, you know? And Phil's like, yeah, I know. And then he would go to Bob and say, hey, Bob, I was just talking to Phil. And Phil says, hey, he remembers the good old days when you guys were friends, used to do everything together, and he really misses that. And he wishes you guys weren't fighting, but it's so hard to go and apologize, you know? Yeah, I know. And the next time Bob and Phil see each other in the supermarket, they're like, hey, what's going on? Hey. Start talking again. Before you know it, best friends again, as they call them in my children's world, besties. Right? So Aaron did that. Not exactly 100% truthful, but you know what? He got them become besties again. So it seems like there's a little bit of wiggle room over here when it comes to the truth. Now, I'm going to give you a scenario which you're not going to like. So I'm going to use somebody else. Bob. Poor Bob, by the way. We pick on Bob, literally, I mean, just all the time. Bob. Anyway, here's the deal. Bob is somewhere in the audience today. And Bob's like, okay, I like this rabbi. He's saying it's okay to lie for the sake of peace. So anyway, Bob goes back to work after lunch, Lauren. That's all good. But next week, there's a huge project at Bob's office. It's like the end of their company's fiscal year. And all the reports have to be submitted by Thursday at 5. And he says to his wife in the beginning of the week, he says, listen, honey. He says, this week, this is like an accountant on April 11th. You know what I'm saying? I'm just not going to be able to be there the whole week this week. I mean, I'll get home at 10 o'clock every night because we have to get all the reports in. Everything has to be submitted by Thursday at 5. The wife says, okay, honey, I understand. No problem. But Thursday night, you get out of that office at 5 o'clock, you come straight home, and I am going off to the spa to get a massage and a facial while you are taking care of our 3 delicious and wonderful children that I'll be dealing with the entire week by myself. Deal? Sure, deal. Sounds good. So Bob, the whole week, is working hard. His wife's working harder. Kids all by herself, etc., etc. But she just knows, come Thursday, she has an appointment already. Then, on Thursday, they finally are getting the paper in, and every department's handing it in. The entire report's just growing and building beautifully. At about 4:45 p.m., one of his coworkers peeps over the cubicle and says, "Hey Bob, listen, we're all going out to the bar down the street to celebrate. We finally got this report in. You want to come?" Now the correct answer for that is no. But when did that ever stop anybody? So he's like, you know what, just for a few minutes. Just for a few minutes. So, Bob conveniently turns off his phone. The battery ran out. And he goes to the bar, and he's just going to have just a drink. Just a drink. They're celebrating. The whole office is there. They're having a great time. He's schmoozing with all his friends. Just another drink. And another. And another. And then finally, by the time he looks down at his watch, it's 8:45 p.m. He's like, holy cow, I am in such trouble. So he calls a cab or an Uber or whatever. He gets home. And he's standing at the doorstep. And he just knows it's not going to be pretty on the other side of this door. But then he remembers. He did go to that class with Rabbi Burnham last week. And Rabbi Burnham did say that you're allowed to lie for the sake of peace. Oh, thank you, Rabbi Burnham. I would have paid $80 for that class. So he takes a little thing of banaka, sprays his mouth. You guys remember banaka?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's even sold anymore. A little bit of banaka. And he straightens up his tie or whatever. And he comes into the door and she is, "Where have you been?" She's like, "Honey, you wouldn't believe it. Phil from accounting messed up the spreadsheets. We had to do the whole thing over again. They made us all stay. No one was allowed to leave the office. They just let us out. I am so angry." Now, is that allowed? You're lying for the sake of peace?
No.
No, why not?
Because it's trying to get out of trouble. Saving your
Of course it's not allowed. You're not allowed to lie to cover your own guilt. You're allowed to lie to help other people not have fights. Like God telling Abraham that Sarah said, "I'm so old." He wasn't covering for himself, he was covering for Sarah. And when Aaron, the high priest, was telling people, Phil wants to be your friend again and Bob wants to be your friend again, he was covering for them. As a matter of fact, even when Jacob was not being 100% truthful to his father and telling him, "I am Esau, your firstborn," and all that, and he sort of stole the blessings, he was covering for Esau because he didn't want to tell his father that his older son sold his entire birthright for a bowl of lentils. That would have been crushing to his father. That would have made his father have incredible ill will towards his son. How could he? How could he sell his firstborn rights for a bowl of lentil soup? So the whole thing with Jacob not being 100% truthful there was really just a cover for Esau. He could have come in and said, "Dad, I get the blessings because I bought the firstborn right, because your older son, who you like, is so irresponsible and has no value for anything spiritual that he sold me his spiritual firstborn rights for a bowl of lentil soup. And yes, I threw in bread." He didn't want to tell his father that. Okay. So for starters, we start to see you are allowed to change the truth to help other people have peace. Or even, for example, let's go back to the case of the meat that tastes like earth. If you say to your wife in that situation, or by the way, maybe your husband, maybe could be it's your husband who came home and made you that amazing food, and he thinks he's such a great chef at the grill, and he thinks his meat is so good and it really tastes like earth, whatever it is. When you say, this meat is amazing, can I have some more? You're not covering for you. You're covering for them, for her, for him, whoever it is. You're not trying to cover any guilt that you did. You want them to feel comfortable. You want them to feel happy, and they would not feel comfortable if they knew that their meat tastes like earth. Okay, you should know, by the way, when I was in social work school, and I gave that exact impassioned defense using the case of meat that tastes like earth. So, one of the girls in my class, there was an Israeli girl in the class. I'm not sure why she had it out for me, but she used to always like attack me. I think whatever. I don't know what it was. Anyway, so she's like, you don't lie. You say the green beans are very good. To which I said, clearly you're not married. Which was true. Because I knew that even if she had been married with that kind of attitude, she would have been divorced too. Anyway, that does not work well. The green beans are good. That's almost as good as saying when your wife says, how do I look? Well, your sister looks good. Okay, so let's get to some more cases. There's a very fascinating case in the Talmud. The Talmud says the following case. What do you say when you dance before a Kala? In the olden days, it seems like they would make sort of like, when they would go to a chasana, they would say some sort of like, they would say like different, it wasn't just like a dance, it was like I guess a song and dance, like you would prepare a song and dance for the bride or for the groom. So what do you say? So look at the source, Talmud number 8. The rabbis teach, how should one dance before, or like compliment the bride? So the Academy of Shammai says the bride is as she is. The Academy of Hillel says no matter what you say, the bride is beautiful and virtuous. The Academy of Shammai said to the Academy of Hillel, what if she is lame or blind? Which, by the way, blind is beautiful, lame is beautiful. But in those days, that was considered more of a challenge, so to speak. Do you say that the bride is beautiful and virtuous? Torah states, keep far from falsehood. Right? So, basically, what happens if the bride is incredibly unattractive? What do you say then? The Academy of Hillel says to the Academy of Shammai, well, according to you, what happens when your friend made a bad purchase at the market? See, here in America, we have an amazing customer service world. The very concept that you can basically return anything, and often after you've worn it, is insane. That's not the way things work in the rest of the world. Just so you should know that. Like, I mean, if it's brand new, most of the world will take it back. But we in America, the return policies in America are incredibly, incredibly favorable. So, let's imagine though, you bought it at final sale, super clearance, you bought this, your friend bought a suit on final sale, super clearance, and he says, how does it look? Now what are you going to say? Well, to be honest with you, now that you just bought that super expensive suit that was final clearance, only $500, and you spent all that money, let me tell you, I would rather wear a cereal box. No, you're going to say, oh, it's beautiful. So, the Academy of Hillel says, according to you, if someone made a purchase from the market, should you praise it or denigrate it in front of him? You have to say that you should praise it in front of him. Based on this, the sages say, La'olam tehei daito shel adam mu'reves ha'mabrios. A person's mind should always be enmeshed with other people. Which means understand what people are asking you. Understand what people are saying to you. when they're saying to you, how do I look in this thing that is brand new and they just bought for a lot of money and it's no return, no deposit, no return, what are they saying to you? They're not saying to you, give me the straight up truth. They're saying, I want to know that I look beautiful in this. That's really what they're saying. When a wife says to a husband, how do I look? What she's saying is, I want to know that you find me beautiful. She's not really looking for your fashion advice. You have to have your mind enmeshed with other people. When a guy just finished building a new deck, and he spent months putting that deck together and hammering and cutting, and he says, look at my new deck, how do you like it? And you know what, to be quite frank, it's okay. It's okay. But you know what, it's kind of a homemade kind of look, What does he really want to hear? He wants to hear that after all this time and effort that I put in, that people like what I did. Based on this, the sages say a person's mind should always be enmeshed with other people. There are those that say, I always say it like it is. And when people tell me that, when people tell me, I always say it like it is, you know what I think in my mind? This is exactly what I think when I hear people telling me that. I feel bad for those in your life. Because we're not meant to be always saying it like it is. We're meant to be there for other people and to help them and to bring peace and joy into the world. Not to break down other people. When someone says, I always say it like it is, they're generally saying, what they're really saying is, I'm abrasive, obnoxious, rude. That is what they're saying. I should say that to them. Really? Well, here's what I think that means. You're abrasive, obnoxious, and rude. I'm just saying like it is. You don't have any real friends. Yes.
Let's say you go shopping with a friend, and they come out and they say, how does this look on me? And you say, well, it's not my taste, but it looks nice on you.
First of all, that's fine. If they're going shopping with you, you also have to gauge yourself really. Sometimes you're just going shopping as a stand-along, right? And you can just say, it looks nice or whatever. But sometimes if they're really asking your opinion, if they really want to know, and they haven't bought it yet, that's a very different ball game. If they haven't bought it yet, and it really sits very it just ill-fitting on them or whatever it is, you could say, I'll be honest, I think it's really nice. However, it doesn't really do justice to you or whatever. You could say something like that because they're asked. That's probably why they went shopping with you, because they value your opinion. They want to know what you think. That's why guys, when we go shopping, we kind of hang out together. We congregate, in the front of the store and commiserate. We're usually there for companionship, not for real opinions. You know what I'm saying? Which is okay. Yes.
In the early 60s, I was selling Tupperware.
Yeah.
Which meant that I was going to people's homes. And the one rule they told me, and I never forgot it, wherever you go, the house could be a garbage can, but there's something in there that you can find that is nice looking, and you could pinpoint on that and ignore the rest of the things, because otherwise you're not going to make a sale.
Very nice. So so did you hear it? What's your name again?
Helen Pink.
Helen. So what Helen is saying is that when she was selling Tupperware, but I remember my mom going to Tupperware parties. So what Helen is saying is that when she would sell at a house, you always have to point out something beautiful. And even if the house was a dump, they taught her, find one thing that's beautiful and give that praise. Now, by the way, in a certain way, that's like Beis Shammai. Because what is Beis Shammai saying? When Beis Shammai says the bride is as she is, does that mean that a guy should get up and dance in front of his friend and say, your bride is ugly, she is so ugly. The good news is that no one's taking her from you. So what is Beis Shammai saying? What Beis Shammai is saying, look at the source number 9. The bride is as she is, and if she has a defect, one should keep silent and not praise her. Alternatively, he should praise her in some other element of beauty that she does have, such as her eyes or her hands if they are beautiful. Okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. So Beis Shammai is not saying lie, and he's not saying call her out and call her ugly. He's saying just say she has such beautiful eyes. You know, your friend leans back at the wedding. So look at my wonderful bride. What do you think? Wow, she's got such beautiful blue eyes, so striking, so alive, so lively. That's what Beis Shammai says. And then why does Beis Hillel say you should lie? If you can get away with saying the truth, why don't you do that? However, the Academy of Hillel says you should just praise her, go all out. Your wife is amazing. She's a ravishing beauty. Because if you only say your wife's got good eyes, imagine a guy at his wedding. And he starts going around to his friends and kind of asking their opinion. And at the end of the day, he's gone to 11 friends, and all he's heard about his wife is that she has beautiful eyes and very, very nicely painted fingernails. It's a little bit of like a downer, you know? Therefore, Beis Hillel says, just give her the praise. She's beautiful, she's radiant, she's amazing, she's wonderful. She's so alive, she's so charismatic. All right? How do we rule? Do we rule like Beis Shammai, or do we rule like Beis Hillel? Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch, Even HaEzer, which is the section of the Shulchan Aruch that deals with marriage, Siman, chapter 65, it should say, 1. It is a mitzvah to gladden a groom and a bride and to dance before her, saying that she is beautiful and virtuous, even if she is not. So that's how we rule. Now there are other areas in which a person is allowed to say dishonesties. Rabbi Yeshua, source number 11, Rabbi Yehuda, said in the name of Shmuel, the rabbis permitted one to change one's words in these 3 areas. In the case of one's learning, in the case of intimacy and hospitality. So learning is for humility. If someone says, oh, I heard you know the entire Babylonian by heart. Is that true? No. Even though it is true. Or is it true that you learned the entire tractate Bava Metzia in the last 6 months with all the commentaries? It is true. No. You can be humble like that. So you're allowed to change the truth in the areas of humility. The next one is in terms of intimacy. If someone asks you details about who you were intimate with or not, which is absolutely none of their business, you are absolutely allowed to lie about that. That's just inappropriate. Also, for the modesty. So we got humility and modesty. And hospitality. This is a very weird case. It strikes the modern ear with a strange sensibility. But back then, if someone showed up at your door, you were sort of required to offer them hospitality. My wife and I went to Mount Vernon. We had an amazing time. Okay? And we learned that back then, if someone, in the colonial America, if someone showed up at your door, the proper thing was to just invite them in for the night. I mean, imagine, there'd be no Motel 6, right?
There was no Motel 6.
That's right. There was no Motel. Believe it or not, there was a time where they were not leaving the light on for you. So, there was no Motel 6. There was no, I mean, you would just knock on someone's door. And George Washington, indeed, they have a whole incredible records and logs of who he had over. And like often, just strangers would show up at his door, and he would say, here, come on in, stay the night. And here's the challenge. So you pass by George Washington's house in Mount Vernon, and he says, here, stay the night. And he feeds you. Amazing. And he gives you a beautiful bed and a nice comfortable room all by yourself with a fireplace. And wow, this is amazing. Now you get to town the next day, and everyone says, no, how was it by George? If you tell him it was amazing, George is going to be flooded with visitors every single night. So therefore, you're allowed to say, it was all right. Isn't that interesting? You're not being truthful about how awesome your hospitality was to protect your hosts from being flooded by guests.
That's very nice.
Isn't that interesting? It's a very interesting way of looking at it. Someone say it's not very nice, or it is very nice?
I said it's very nice.
It's very nice, but it's not our way of thinking. I mean, today's day and age, you know, usually if someone gave you good hospitality, you would think the way to treat them right was by saying it was amazing. Okay, another example. Mishnah Nadarim, one may make a vow to murderers, robbers, and crooked tax collectors that the item they seek is confiscated, is truma, or it belongs to someone else, even if it's not, or that it belongs to the royal house, even if it's not. So basically, a guy holds you up and says, I want that golden vase. You're allowed to swear to him that it belongs to the king. You can take the golden vase. I'm just warning you, it belongs to the government, and if they find out that you took it, they're going to come after you. Oh, okay, forget it. You swear to me? I swear to you. Those are that crooked tax collectors who would just basically pay a crooked king a fee, $1,000, let's say, and then they could tax anybody any amount they wanted. There was no tax code. Today, I don't know if there's really any one single tax code. Anyway, there's like 18 billion pages, and nobody really knows what's going on. But anyway, but it does not mean that you're allowed to lie to the IRS at all. When it comes to the IRS, there is a tax code. It applies equally to all people. And Dina de Malchus Dina, which means the law of the kingdom is the law, and you have to give it exactly as it is. But when it comes to those days, you were allowed to lie also, for, so to speak, for protection and self-preservation. So we gave a bunch of examples where you do not need to be 100% honest, but let's talk for a moment about the virtues of honesty, and then let's try to understand basically how God, so to speak, could say a lie. Because one of the things that we learn is that God's very own seal is honesty. There's a story in the Talmud where the Jews, they weren't sure, there was a whole, they wanted to do like this, they didn't want to do like that, and in the end, a piece of paper, a piece of a shard came down from heaven, and the word truth was stamped on it. And from here, the Talmud learns that God's signet ring is truth. Which means that a person would make a seal of armor, like a coat of armor, or a coat of arms, that indicated what their family believed in. If they were swift and mighty, it would have a picture maybe of a deer and a lion, right? If they were kind and generous, different things. It would have like a cornucopia, whatever it was, that represented who they were. When a message comes down from heaven, what does it say? MS, God is truth. So we got to understand, if God is truth, if that's what He is, how do you find a lie, so to speak? God saying, it was Sarah said this, Sarah didn't say that. How could God, so to speak, say a non-truth? If you don't have lemons in your refrigerator, you can't make lemonade in your house right now. It's just impossible. If God is truth, how does He have falsehood able to emanate from Him? So the way I describe this is there's micro-truth and macro-truth. The macro-truth is that this world was built to be a world of kindness, a world of peace, a world of unity. Olam chesed yibaneh. The world was created for shalom, for peace. It's the ultimate shleimut, perfection of the world. Let's go back to the meat and the earth situation. My wife says to me, how does the meat taste? The micro-truth is that it tastes like earth. However, that's a macro lie, because that goes against the grain of the macro-truth of the world, so to speak. Because the macro-truth of the world is a world in which kindness and peace reign supreme. You cannot have a macro-truth overridden by a micro-truth. Are you guys with me? Micro-truth, macro-truth? So there are a lot of times where right here and right now, the micro-truth is X, but the macro-truth, the truth of the world, the truth of existence is Y. And we choose the greater truth over the smaller truth. There are times where the two cannot be reconciled. You cannot say both the macro-truth and the micro-truth at the same time. In those cases, we choose the macro-truth over the micro-truth. So it's still a truth. It's just the greater macro-truth, not the micro-truth. And that's sort of maybe how we understand the story with God and Abraham and Sarah. And Aaron HaKohen and Aaron the high priest and Jacob. And the Talmud saying we're allowed to lie for this, we're allowed to lie for that. Because we're not lying on the macro level. As a matter of fact, we're saying the greatest truth on the macro level. It requires a micro lie. It's an interesting perspective on seeing that. At the end of the day, however, when we do speak the truth, we know that if you look at source number under 15, it says the lesson of the letters. The shin, the words for falsehood is sheker. A shin, in this picture, the font that I use doesn't have it, but in Sefer Torah, the shin goes down to a point. The kuf goes down to a point. The resh stands on one leg. None of those letters can stand on their own. If you look at the word emet, the first letter, aleph, 2 feet, the mem has 2 feet, the taf has 2 feet, they can all stand on their own, which teaches us that sheker, there's only so long you can stand on 1 foot. Right? As a matter of fact, they say that if you can stand for 1 minute, it's a sign of good heart health, so you can try this at home. But sheker, which only has 1 foot, can only stand for so long before it comes toppling down. Emes tikon la'ad. Emes will stand forever. Furthermore, what is the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet? Aleph, the middle letter, mem, and the last letter, taf. To show that when something is emet, it should be emet through and through from the beginning until the end. And that is what we are all about. So may we all have an amazingly truthful week. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.